and decision making. More recently, he's been he hangs a flag, thin blue line flag, on his office, and a student said that the flag had racist origin, and that the student said, quote, "This is an inappropriate and unnecessary symbol to have on an office door," where USC is, within the last year or two, trying to have a much broader diversity initiative and to be inclusive, especially in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics area, one USC graduate student told the paper. And my next guest is extremely well credentialed. It would take me almost half hour to go over all of his credentials, but he has his BS in industrial engineering and urban planning from Northwestern, MS in engineering from Stanford, master's and PhD also from Stanford, and he has been professor of industrial systems engineering policy, planning and development, and civil environmental engineering, has been with USC since 1998. Please welcome to the program Professor James Elliott Moore II. Professor, thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Professor, would you have a job if you were not tenured?
Not at all.
Wow.
There's no possibility that they would retain me if they had any means of releasing me at this point.
What does that say, not just about SC, but what does that say in general about academia?
We've become a monoculture, a progressive C. Dissent really is tolerated only if necessary. It's no real surprise at this point that 2/3 of USC's full-time faculty is non-tenure track, because people who speak with a tenured voice sometimes say things you don't want to hear. And we get enough of that sort of thing already, I think, is the general attitude.
Wow. Professor, I saw a study about freshman students at Dartmouth who described themselves as conservative versus those who described themselves as liberals. And the liberals were asked, would you have a roommate who was conservative? The conservatives were asked, would you have a roommate who was liberal? And the liberals were 4 times more likely to say they would not have a roommate of somebody who was of an opposing view. The conservatives were far more tolerant and were perfectly happy to have a roommate who was liberal.
I'm not at all surprised. It seems. I imagine if they had surveyed the faculty, they'd get exactly the same response.
Now, Professor, when you first got to SC, before you got tenured, did you have the same kind of sort of attitude about concern about this kind of groupthink and intolerance that you feel that you apparently have right now? I mean, did you feel welcome then, or has something happened over the time that you've been there?
A lot has happened. So I arrived at USC in 1988. And I had spent a couple of years on Northwestern's faculty, and it's all a blur of eye-bursting, skin-ripping, bone-cracking cold, basically. But so I was really happy to be here, and it was a place where there were multiple points of view, and I had the leadership was relatively conservative politically. There were changes taking place incrementally in various departments, humanities, social sciences. There had always been something of a left orientation in these groups, but it was not a single-mindedness. There were voices of conservative or libertarian or objectivist thought elsewhere on the faculty. And unfortunately, I think what happened is incrementally the tyranny of the majority took over in hiring decisions. And you don't need a very large majority when it comes to a vote to exercise a lot of power when you're in an academic personnel context. And as a result, I think largely in an unplanned but very definite fashion, a small majority became a larger majority, and basically the point of view structured around progressivism became almost ubiquitous across applied social science, humanities. It's been slower in business, but it has happened even in business. I figured economics would protect business, but it's happening within economics also. I'd say they're the social science that has held out the longest, but they have been overtaken by this groupthink phenomenon also. And right now there's a battle that's just beginning to heat up in the physical sciences and engineering.
Wow.
I really don't. I'm guardedly hopeful there that performance is what's really going to matter when it comes to personnel decisions, not group identity or political orientation. But that remains to be seen.
My guest is Professor James Moore. He's been at USC since 1988. He's professor of industrial and systems engineering. Professor, I saw a study once about colleges, big, small, private, public, east, west, north, south, and they looked at the registrations of the professors, those who do register at a political party, overwhelmingly left-wing. You get a history department, 30 professors, might be one or two that registered as a Republican, the rest of them registered as Democrats, or even a more left-wing party. How do you feel? We only have a minute left. How do you feel? Are students boycotting your classes? Are they disrupting your classes? How are your colleagues treating you?
My colleagues on the policy side of the barrier are pretty annoyed. Mm-hmm. My engineering colleagues are more of a mixed group. There's a mixed point of view there, and I think even among those who disagree with me politically, they've got enough character to understand that diverse viewpoints are a strength, not a weakness. So that's one reason that I remain hopeful about that sphere.
Professor, real quickly, why do you stay?
I love the students. I really do.
Professor James Moore has been my guest. Professor, thank you so much for taking the time. God bless.
My pleasure.